You're traveling through another podcast. A podcast not only of reviewing and discussing, but of discovery. A journey into a wondrous show whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the RSS feed up ahead. Your next stop, Anthology.
Hello and welcome to Anthology, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and if this is your first time listening, Anthology is one man's examination of the Twilight Zone as a first-time viewer. Each podcast, I share my first impressions, analysis, and overall thoughts on Rod Serling's iconic series, one episode at a time. I also cover modern anthology science fiction shows, such as Black Mirror, Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone reboot, and more in bonus episode review series. You can find more of Anthology as well as a full episode archive at anthologypod.com. And if you want to contact me, you can use the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod, tweet me at OVAnthologypod, or send an email to matt@obsessiveviewer.com. Today on the show, I'll be discussing The Prime Mover. It's the 21st episode of The Twilight Zone's second season, and it originally aired on March 24th, 1961. And rounding out the episode, as I have been the last couple of episodes, I will be round out the show with a brief review of Science Fiction Theater, Season 1, Episode 3, No Food for Thought. I'm still kind of determining whether or not I want to commit to a full Science Fiction Theater bonus review series in tandem with the original Twilight Zone. Still on the fence about it. I did realize that if I do that, basically my kind of roadmap for that is I'll review an episode of Science Fiction Theater with every original Twilight Zone episode review. But my thought is, since there is, I think, 78 Science Fiction Theater episodes, what I think I might do, if I do commit to the full one, like I said, I'm giving myself until the end of Season 2 of The Twilight Zone to really determine whether or not I want to commit to it. But anyway, if I do commit to it, then I would be able to finish Science Fiction Theater like one or two episodes before finishing out the entire original series of the Twilight Zone, but only if I skip, only if I don't do bonus reviews during Season 4 of the Twilight Zone, which I think would make sense since Season 4 is all hour-long episodes. But I might have something kind of fun when it eventually comes to that I'll do instead of doing Science Fiction Theater. But anyway, that's all conjecture. That's all up in the air. We'll see how it goes after I finish out Season 2 of The Twilight Zone. Before I get into the episode proper, I have it listed in my notes under news. It's not news. It's just something that's I'm vain about, and it's my vanity. But anyway, something kind of cool happened. I was browsing the Twilight Zone subreddit, and I saw the podcast mentioned just in passing in a comment on a Reddit thread on the Twilight Zone subreddit. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like someone, a user on there, I didn't mark down their username, and I don't want to, quote unquote, put them on blast or anything. But anyway, it was just a nice passing comment. They said that the only, that basically Anthology is the only Twilight Zone podcast that they currently listen to. So if you're the one that commented that on Reddit, thank you. And, I hope you enjoy the show. So, let's dive right into my review of The Prime Mover. I am going to go ahead and read a plot description from courtesy of The Twilight Zone, Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic by Martin Grams Jr. And just be forewarned that, of course, as always, I will be spoiling this entire episode of The Twilight Zone. So if you haven't seen this episode, go check it out on any streaming service because it's available anywhere, and then come back and listen to the episode. So here we go. The plot summary according to Twilight Zone, Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic. Ace Larson, co-owner and operator of a roadside diner, pushes a losing streak that no rabbit's foot can can cure. When a serious auto accident outside the diner forces Jimbo Cobb to use his brain power and push the wrecked car off live electric wires, Ace discovers his partner possesses a rare gift of moving objects no matter how large or small. Jimbo has kept this power a secret and prefers not to use it unless necessary. Ace gets a brainstorm and convinces his girlfriend Kitty and Jimbo to travel to Las Vegas. Using his talent to ensure the roulette wheel and dice games land to their liking, Jimbo gives Ace the edge he needs to win $200,000 within a few hours. When his expectations run too high, Kitty leaves to return home. The next afternoon, Ace arranges to wager all his winnings with a high-shot Chicago gangster. Before the afternoon is over, Jimbo runs out of steam, causing Ace to lose every dollar. Back at the roadside diner, Ace confesses that his love for Kitty is worth more than all the money in Vegas and proposes marriage. She accepts, knowing full well that Ace has learned his lesson. As for Jimbo, he still has his talent. He just wanted Ace to get back home to Kitty. Okay, so talent rundown for the prime mover. This episode stars Dane Clark as Ace Larson. This was his only episode of The Twilight Zone. However, he would go on to appear in an episode of Night Gallery in 1971, titled Spectre in Tap Shoes. He also appeared in 2 episodes of science fiction theater, both in 1955. Those episodes are The Negative Man and Before the Beginning. So if I commit to this bonus review series, we'll be talking about Dane Clark. And I'm excited at that prospect because he was fantastic in this episode. Also, piece of trivia about Dane Clark. In an interview, he said that he and Ida Lupino, who, of course, was in 16mm Shrine and directed The Masks, he said that they fell in love and became engaged while shooting Deep Valley, a 1947 movie. She took him home to meet her family, and he said that he had such an adverse reaction to them, calling them, quote, leeches and freeloaders, that he called off the wedding. I didn't go into depth to kind of corroborate that, so it's just a piece of trivia on IMDb, but kind of interesting and a kind of really bizarre and I guess a disappointing connection to the Twilight Zone. So co-starring as Jimbo Cobb is Buddy Ebsen. I don't remember if I mentioned that Dane Clark played Ace Larson. But anyway, Buddy Ebsen plays Jimbo Cobb. This was also his only episode of The Twilight Zone. He would also, much like Dane Clark, go on to appear in a Night Gallery segment. His segment was in 1971 titled The Waiting Room. He was also known for his role in Breakfast at Tiffany's, and he was probably best known for his roles in The Beverly Hillbillies in the 1960s and as the title character in Barnaby Jones in the 1970s. And not rounding out the cast, but next up in the cast is Christine White as Kitty Kavanaugh. This is her first of 2 Twilight Zones. She plays, I believe she plays Shatner's wife in season 5's iconic Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. I at least assume she plays his wife, like kind of obviously the whole concept of this podcast is I'm going in blind, so we'll see. We'll see in quite a while because that's in season 5. She also appeared in an episode of One Step Beyond to kind of tie it into sci-fi anthology shows of the era. Her episode of One Step Beyond was in 1960, and it was titled The Haunting. And rounding out the cast as Big Phil Nolan, the Chicago gangster, is Nesden Booth. This is actually his second of 2 Twilight Zone episodes. He previously played the guard in Escape Clause way back in the early days of season 1. I don't really have any other notes or anything about him except that he actually ended up dying about 4 years after this episode aired of a heart attack. So he didn't really have any other acting credits or that were relevant to this episode, I guess. Writer for this episode was Charles Beaumont. This is his 7 of 22 episodes. And it's interesting because we're in a string of Beaumont episodes. His previous episode was last time Static, and the next one will be the next episode that we review, Long Distance Call. So that's kind of interesting how that kind of shaped out. Director for this episode was Richard L. Baer. This is his 4th of 7 episodes. Previously, he directed Nick of Time, and next we'll see from him is next season, I believe, To Serve Man, which is... To Serve Man is like one of those episodes, like those iconic episodes that I would say of the episodes I'm aware of, just from being like a person who has lived and had my ear to the ground to pop culture for, most of my life. I would say that To Serve Man is perhaps the episode that I'm most looking forward to watching in this entire for this entire podcast. I'm just really excited about it. I think that harkens back to my love of The Simpsons, and in one of the early Treehouse of Horror episodes, they parodied it very well. So I'm really looking forward to watching To Serve Man. So, that's, I'll go into my, review of The Prime Mover. Once again, I'm going to be spoiling the episode, so please, if you haven't seen it, go check it out and come back and listen to my review. Before I get into my actual review, as is customary, I'm going to go ahead and talk about what I knew about the episode before going into it. And it was one of, before watching this for the first time, it was another one of those episodes where I know the name, but literally nothing else about it. And I kind of thought that it was some kind of futuristic totalitarian government story. But I might have conflated that with what I know about the obsolete man later this season. So I think that that's where I got that kind of confusion there. And with the title, The Prime Mover, I know that the terminology of the Prime Mover is something mechanical or something, I don't know exactly what it is, but, reading that title, not knowing that kind of context for what a Prime Mover is, I kind of wondered if it was about a character who worked in sales, like they are the prime mover of a particular type of merchandise. And then also the word prime made me think of math, and that's all I have for my notes on that. So basically, as you can tell, I had no idea what I was getting into when I watched this episode. So yeah, those are my thoughts before I watched the episode. Okay, so yeah, to go into my actual review of The Prime Mover, it opens on a shot of the Happy Days Cafe, which, as far as names of things from the Twilight Zone and everything, I'm not familiar with Happy Days Cafe as a point of reference for people that are fans of the Twilight Zone. I don't know if there's any merchandise about it or anything. But I could see, I don't think the new Twilight Zone series has referenced it or not, but I could see them easily referencing it. So it opens with Ace talking to the one-armed bandit, the slot machine, which is the same slot machine from The Fever. Although, according to Unlocking the Door to Television Classic, I think the props notes that he poured over when compiling the book confirmed that it's not the exact same one-armed bandit that was used in the filming of The Fever, but it's the same type of slot machine. So it's a really interesting way to bring us into the episode, because Ace is talking directly to it. He's talking to it as if it's his girlfriend or a sweetheart or anything. And he's saying I've fed you, I've given you what you needed. Why don't you please give me what I need now? And it's kind of in stark contrast to Franklin in The Fever. So Ace here he's smooth talking a slot machine, and it's silly, but he's very animated about it, and it's kind of hinting at okay, well, this is the introduction of this character, and he does have a gambling problem, but it's more just pleasantries. It's more pleasant than anything, and that kind of, I think that is a really good way to establish the tone that the episode is going to carry throughout the rest of the runtime, because we already had the compulsive gambling, somewhat addictive kind of storyline in The Fever. This is more of a character that is kind of overcome by his hubris and his want for a better life, and it's just it's an interesting contrast to the Fever, and I'll get more into detail as I progress through this review. But first, immediately, my first reaction to this episode is after watching Static so many times, Static being one of the videotaped episodes. I was just so thankful to get back to a filmed episode, because God, the picture in this episode looks so gorgeous. It's just so beautiful, and I was so happy to get back to that. And spoiler for my review of Long Distance Call next time, but that was a good looking videotaped episode, and I don't know what the deal was with Static, because Static just looked terrible. Like, I don't know if maybe they didn't have the source materials when they were upgrading it for Blu-ray and everything, because it just looked very aged, and I think that kind of maybe contributed to some of my issues with the episode, or the experience of watching the episode at least. So getting back to the prime mover, Ace is upset because the slot machine does not pay out for him, and he has a customer who is basically telling him, why don't you just give it up or whatever, and then Ace offers to flip a coin with the patron, and if he loses, then the food is on the house. The patron wins. The customer wins and uses the quarter to use on the slot machine, and wins the jackpot. And I love that he takes a quarter from the winnings and just puts it in Ace's pocket, and he's like, "Here's your quarter back." I thought that was kind of funny. So this scene just establishes that Ace works in the cafe, in the roadside diner. It's kind of revealed later, or it's more implied and revealed throughout the episode, that he is the owner of the place. And I believe that it's stated that Ace and Jimbo kind of own the place together, or are co-owners. And as stated in the plot summary from Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic, that's kind of the idea. So basically, the diner consists of Ace and Jimbo. They co-own the place. Jimbo looks to be kind of the cook / kind of janitorial guy. And there's Kitty, who is kind of a waitress in the establishment. And so it's shown once Kitty goes home, she has this kind of quip about how she can't quit the job because Ace owes her 3 months of her salary, which I like the kind of playfulness of that dialogue. But when she leaves, Jimbo asks Ace, he's like, "Hey, when are you guys going to get married?" Kind of establishing that they're in a relationship. Ace and Kitty are. And what I loved about this line is something that honestly I missed the first time I watched it. It wasn't until subsequent viewings that I caught it, but Jimbo offers to give them money so that they can get married. Like Jimbo asks, when are you guys going to get married? And then Ace is like, well, she deserves the world, and I can't provide that to her. So, and I don't have the money for it. And then Jimbo just says super earnestly, he says, "I have a little money saved up, and you guys can use that." And everything. And I just, in that moment, I love Jimbo as a character. That character is so just good-natured. And it establishes, that line itself establishes the kindness of the character and his love for Ace and Kitty. Throughout the episode, I love that that's his kind of arc, is that he just loves his friends, and there's no jealousy, there's no conflict, just genuine care for the well-being of the people that he's closest to, and meaning Ace and Kitty. And I love that. That's such a genuinely good character design. He doesn't have that's maybe his character flaw, is that he is too he's too genuine or too caring for his friends, and that causes he's able to be susceptible to some light, not manipulation, but he's able to accept Ace kind of using him for personal gain for a while. So I just love that line and how it establishes Jimbo as a character. So immediately after that, we get the car wreck outside the cafe, and like my immediate thought was like, wow, that looks beautiful. Like it's an incredible effect shot, and I was really curious how they managed to pull that off, because it looks great, and I know that in the past they've kind of sped up the film to get the desired effect. I was thinking of like the scene in A Passage for Trumpet, but this didn't look sped up at all, and it looked like a natural stunt, and I was very impressed by it. Turns out that it was footage from a 1958 movie called Thunder Road that was kind of repurposed for this episode of The Twilight Zone. But I will say that, like, I wasn't disappointed to learn that or anything, because it's still an impressive shot. And I do want to point out that the set design for this episode of The Twilight Zone, specifically in that sequence, like the follow-up sequence, is really impressive. Like, it matches the footage really well. Like, it matches where the car ends up in the shot from Thunder Road. It looks like a really good recreation of that place. And it was really impressive set design in that. So Jimbo and Ace run out to help the people in the car, and like they had crashed into like a power transformer or something, and the electricity is like just popping and whirring and everything, and that makes the entire situation just outright terrifying, honestly. And what I loved about, like, I was so surprised by this scene, because the episode kind of subverted expectations here, for me at least. So the electricity, like the threat of the electricity after establishing a down on his luck main character, it could be reasonably expected that he would gain some sort of power in that scene. And I really thought that that's what the episode was going to be about, because at that point we don't know anything about Jimbo's powers or anything. So I was like, okay, here we go. The Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone's going to give him some power. And like couple that with the kind of, the line, just a few minutes ago in the episode where Ace says, where like Jimbo tries to reassure Ace and says that maybe his luck will change, and Ace says, maybe I'll get electrocuted. And then they're in a scenario where electricity is flying everywhere and it's dangerous. And to my complete surprise, it's revealed that the cook, or that Jimbo, is able to move the car with his mind. And I thought that was so clever and interesting, because up until this point, we have been following Ace. He's the main character, and he's going to, like he is down on his luck because he's a gambler who can't catch a break. And I really thought that it was going to be that he was going to be given some kind of skill or fortune. But instead, Jimbo has this power that he's had forever. And this is just the reveal of that to Ace. And I just thought that was really clever storytelling. Because I was so just surprised by it, and so pleasantly surprised by it. So after that, we get Serling's narration, and I'm going to go ahead and play the narration here in the episode. So here is Serling's narration.
Portrait of a man who thinks and thereby gets things done. Mr. Jimbo Cobb might be called a prime mover, a talent which has to be seen to be believed. In just a moment, he'll show his friends and you how he keeps both feet on the ground and his head in the Twilight Zone.
And I really like this narration because it's succinct, it's straight to the point, it has that just kind of beautiful wording that Serling is so good at. Although, and I think I may have mentioned this before, but I really wonder, did Serling write the opening and closing narrations for every episode, or did he only write the narrations for the episodes that he wrote? And granted, he did write like 90% of the scripts, but like since this is a Charles Beaumont script, I wonder, did he write the narration and Serling just performed it? Or is it something that Serling took control of? Maybe I'll research that a little bit, or try to research it a little bit, and get a definitive answer someday. But, yeah, so anyway, if Beaumont wrote it, he did a great job for the narration, because it's very succinct and it has that just Twilight Zone. I almost said patter, but that sounds almost diminutive of it. But it has just that Twilight Zone twinkle there. I guess that's a better word. So anyway, so I didn't see that coming, and I thought at this point, that the episode was going to switch the main protagonist. I thought that we were going to follow Jimbo specifically, but it turned out that he wasn't the main character. He was still, kind of a supporting character for Ace's storyline. But I love how the show just established their whole dynamic. Even though, like, I kind of thought, like, okay, is Ace going to try to exploit Jimbo? And I mean, that's kind of the way it ends up, but I'll get more into that in a little bit. But I really love how it established their whole dynamic. So Jimbo and Ace are friends. I think they live together is the implication here. And the way that Jimbo explains his power to Ace makes him sound like kind of the slightest bit like simple-minded, just a little bit. And it kind of made me think, and granted I haven't like read this since like high school or seen the movies, but it reminded me a little bit of the dynamic between George and Lenny in Of Mice and Men. And I kind of thought, like, okay, is Jimbo going to be like the Lenny of this, and is it going to be like, is that how it's going to play out, like that kind of arc? But yeah, it ended up kind of not really turning out that way from my perspective. But I do want to say that Dane Clark in the scene when he's talking to Jimbo, I kind of just got this this is a kind of superfluous kind of observation, but I really got like a vibe off of just like the look of Ace and like the way he speaks, the way that Dane Clark speaks. But I got really a vibe of a younger Jack Klugman. Like I thought that there was a bit of a resemblance to like a young Jack Klugman look to Dane Clark, and that made me kind of wish that Dane Clark did more Twilight Zone episodes, because I really liked his performance in this episode. And also kind of going with this superfluous observation string that I'm running here, when Ace gets more animated and behaves like he might hit something, like when he when he is kind of annoyed that Jimbo kept the secret from him, which I'll get to in a second, but he's like kind of like almost threatening to punch him, but like he kicks the door instead. Anyway, like when he's doing like that, when he's behaving that way in the episode, he just reminded me very vaguely of James Caan. So again, that's just a pointless observation. The power gives Jimbo a headache, and I really like that kind of wrinkle to it, that complication to the story and the premise of this story, because it affects his personal health. And Ace, like, it's clearly like affecting him. Like he's clearly like in pain. He mentions like, oh, it gives me a headache. Like now I have a headache. And then Ace is immediately like, can you do it again right now? Dance for me, monkey, please. And this is immediately after Jimbo tells him that he has a headache from it and is in obvious pain and exhaustion. And that's just establishing that Ace is very self-serving, self-centered, and he's so consumed by this desire to win and to get ahead of everything and make a name for himself, would be the implication, that he is willing to sacrifice Jimbo's well-being to do that. So that's kind of the implication here, and it's danced around a little bit throughout the episode. But I think that what we got for the in the episode, it's a lot more complex than that. So I appreciate Beaumont's writing for that. So anyway, I found it interesting that Ace's reaction to finding out about Jimbo's power and the fact that he can flip quarters and manipulate dice is frustration. Like, Ace is frustrated that they could have, he says, we could have been living like kings this whole time. And it's not like he didn't react with excitement for the possibilities that this presents now. It's like he's in a rut, and he has been, he's, instead of like dealing with this like incredible power that he is adjacent to, he is kicking himself and metaphorically kicking his friend for holding out on him, because it could have been, they could have been in a better, they could have better improved their station in life this whole time. And I think that is kind of an interesting, depiction of Ace's mental well-being, I guess, because he is someone who, like, okay, if you found out that you had like an in to get like tons of money, you would be excited about it, I would think. But he is choosing to think about the past and like how he could have been. It's kind of a misery loves company kind of thing. Like he's just kind of living in this kind of somewhat miserable state. So anyway, he calls Kitty and they make arrangements to go on a shore trip. And they go to Vegas. And I just want to say, I love Vegas. Like, it's awesome. I've been there a few times and, it's a lot of fun. But I love seeing Vegas, even if it's just an establishing shot, of like all the neon signs and everything. It's still kind of a treat when it pops up in media that I watch. So Ace and Kitty and Jimbo are in Vegas. They're at the casino, and Ace is just obsessed with winning. And like they're winning like continuously every time because Jimbo's there to manipulate things. And Kitty tries to tell Ace tries to get him to quit while he's ahead, and Ace's reaction is just to scoff and say that he and Jimbo have worked out a system. Which this is interesting to me. First of all, I think it's funny that he's just like he's so I guess in his own world that like he's like he's just like yelling like as a very loudmouth. He's like he's just announcing that he and Jimbo have a system. It's like there are people around you, like people, like casinos, like they don't mess around. Like if they think you're cheating, they could kick you out or whatever. But anyway, so what happened with my mindset when watching this part of the episode is I kind of put myself into this scenario. Like, I like that, like, the premise of this episode is that there's very little risk involved. Like, obviously these days, as I said, casinos are heavily monitored, but if someone's on a hot streak in a game of chance that's involving die and the roulette wheel, it wouldn't arouse nearly as much suspicion as, say, counting cards and blackjack. And, I don't know, I just kind of put myself into that scenario. Like, would I be able to stop? I'll get to that in a second because there's some other stuff I want to kind of get through here. But I'll put a pin in that. So Jimbo tells him that Ace has to quit because his head is killing him. And at this moment, like, okay, we're at kind of a fork in the road for this story, because at this point Ace is obviously using Jimbo as a source of winning to get like to improve Ace's livelihood and everything. But Jimbo tells him that he has to quit because his head is killing him. And like at this point, the fork in the road is like Ace can either be just a complete like insensitive person who is using his friend for his own personal gain, or he can be compassionate. And what I love about this episode is that he is compassionate. Like Ace is a very human character. He's like, okay, I understand. Let's get you some rest and everything. Let's call it a night and cash in the chips. So, they get into like a big suite in the hotel, and I love the wide shot of the room. It kind of vaguely reminded me of A Nice Place to Visit, which kind of has some similar themes and situations as this episode. But, I love the wide shot of it, because you don't, like with these kind of like the diner set, obviously it's not a big diner or anything, but like you don't get a lot of wide shots when you have like these indoor scenes. And I love the wide shot of the big suite that they're in. So, it's very clear that Ace's compulsive gambling is becoming a drain on his friend. And I think that that's an interesting kind of metaphor. Like this, like if you're a self-serving person, or if you have like an addiction of some kind, that is going to be a drain on the people that are closest to you. And I like that as a concept for the Twilight Zone, and as a vessel for the story that's being told in this episode. And what I found interesting is that for all of the goodwill that I talked about Ace like immediately being like, okay, shut it down, let's get you back to the room and get you like, you know, to relax and everything and help your head. For all that goodwill, Ace immediately tries to make him get up so that they can go out on the town. And it was a bit incongruous to the previous scene where he cashes in the chips and tells Jimbo to get some rest. But I think maybe it's also intentionally incongruous to fit that theme that I mentioned about how Ace is a drain on his friend, literally and figuratively. And I didn't have a problem with it. I just thought that was an interesting kind of series of scenes in a short succession that almost seem like they're contradicting each other, but also fits the theme of the episode fairly well. And I found it really interesting that Jimbo at this moment is morally objecting to what they're doing. Like he says, like, it's wrong to do this and everything. And Ace is just like, okay, can we do it just one more time? And I like the kind of complexity brought to Ace's dialogue with Jimbo here, because it's like he is like they're presumably best friends, like they're business partners and they're closest friends, and it's like even though Ace is being consumed by this compulsive need to win and wanting to get as much as he can out of this newfound power, even at the expense of his friend's well-being, he still wants to, like, he still has that moment where he's like, is it okay to do it one more time? Like, can you do it one more time? Are we okay with that? Like, he's going to the trouble of being like giving Jimbo a say into whether or not they're doing it. So he's not fully taking advantage of his friend, or he's not fully like out of his mind with greed and everything, because he still gives Jimbo an out. Now, in this scenario, if Jimbo were to give him some pushback, I'm sure that Ace would have probably pressed him on it and saying like, no, just do it one more time and everything. But as it's written in this scene, I just like that there's that little added line of dialogue where Ace confirms that Jimbo's okay with doing it one more time. I just think that it goes a really long way to show the human side of Ace as he's being kind of romanticized into, or he's being kind of, I don't know what word I'm trying to think of, but he's trying to be persuaded into this greedy lifestyle that he's pursuing. So Kitty gives him some pushback here, and she's pleading with him, like, can we just go home? You've made enough money to last you the rest of your life. And Ace says, like, well, living well enough isn't good enough for me, and by tomorrow I'll have enough to own the state. And the look that Jimbo gives him when he says that makes me think that Jimbo made me think that Jimbo was going to kind of purposely like cause Ace to lose all of his winnings at that moment. And that's kind of what happened, but it didn't happen the way that I expected it to. I actually much prefer the way that it happened in the episode than what my brain could conjure up. But anyway, I'll get to that in a bit. So I just, at this moment, I found myself wondering, like, this is an interesting moral, like, hypothetical. Like, if I had a foolproof way to hit it big with very limited risk. And of course, I host 3 podcasts, so obviously I'm just waiting to become a millionaire doing that. But check out patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Anyway, like, if I had a foolproof way to hit it big with very limited risk, as established before, that, you know, it's games of chance, that they're not counting cards, they're not really, like, they're stealing from the casino in a sense, but it's not like they're stealing from like people, like citizens. They're not stealing money from citizens. They're just creating a scenario where they are very fortunate in winning gambling games. Which is gambling games. Anyway. So like the question that I found myself asking myself was, would I be able to stop at $200,000? Like, would I have that kind of self-control knowing that I am in a situation where there's very limited risk that I will have some kind of negative comeuppance happen? And while I was thinking about that, I was like, I wonder how much $200,000 in 1961 equates to money today. And holy crap, according to the website dollartimes.com, adjusted for inflation, $200,000 in 1961 is equal to $1,686,127.52 in 2019. And just like the thought of that, like, okay, if I went to Vegas for a night and I was able to manipulate things into which I was able to get a $1.6 million, almost $1.7 million, would I be able to stop at that? Or would I want to have $3.4 million after one last score? And I really don't know. Like, when you're playing with that amount of money, like that amount in this hypothetical, like when you're playing with that amount of fortune, like, it's easy to say, like, okay, well, if I had $200,000, I'd be in very good shape. Like, I would be able to pay off some bills and set aside a lot of money for just rainy days and like savings, get like a new car and all that, whatever. But if I had like $1.6 million, like, holy, like, that would be, I'd be set for life, obviously. But I think, and this is such a stupid reference, but I think back to like The Social Network, like, you know what's better than $1 million? $1 billion. Anyway, so at this point, when he's kind of he's telling Kitty that he wants more, like he wants to own the state, or he wants enough to own the state, and he says Aceville, USA, which I thought was kind of, again, it's like Dane Clark does a really good job of keeping the character, and also credit goes to Beaumont for the script, but Dane Clark does a good job of making the character as an unsympathetic character. He still has a lot of sympathy in the way that he presents himself and his demeanor in the episode. So like saying that, like, oh, Aceville, USA, like, that's kind of cheeky and fun. Even though he's talking about, being overcome by greed and everything. So Kitty ends up running out, and she says that she's going home, and tells him to look her up when you're through playing Little Caesar, which I thought was pretty funny. And here is another really good kind of back and forth between Jimbo and Ace. And it reinforces that Jimbo cares deeply for his friends, and he is also a voice of reason. So he tells Ace that Kitty is worth all the money in the world, and he tells him to go after her. Like don't let this, ruin your relationship because because Kitty is worth all the money in the world. And that, in that sense, Jimbo is acting as Ace's conscience. And in addition to that, I like that Ace is willing to listen to Jimbo in that moment. Like, he's a good character deep down. He's just a bit self-centered. And again, fantastic characterization in the writing by Beaumont, and Dane Clark's performance just hits it out of the park. So Ace runs after Kitty, but he can't reconcile his love of gambling with Kitty. So Kitty gives him somewhat of an ultimatum, just saying, like, are you going to gamble tomorrow? And then he says yes, and then she leaves. And at this point, it's where Ace gets a little bit, kind of dances into almost irredeemable territory. Almost. I wouldn't say almost, but anyway, he meets Sheila, the cigarette girl from earlier in the episode. He hires her for the evening to quote unquote tear the town apart, just reinforcing his self-centeredness. And just like the way, like when they're about to leave, she's like, let me go change. And he's like, all right, but not much. Don't change much, because she's very scantily clad. And as likable as Ace is, him hiring Sheila, effectively burning his relationship with Kitty, it's almost too much of a left turn for his character. Because up until this point, I was still I was still with him, even though he is being kind of drawn into this greedy kind of thing that is threatening to destroy his life. So I wouldn't say that him going after Sheila is makes him, I wouldn't say that it's irredeemable or almost irredeemable, but it definitely makes him much less likable. And that was something that it's not that I struggled with it, but it just felt a little bit dangerous from a characterization perspective. But having said that, it's not really that out of character for him either. Like, he's gotten a taste for being a big shot, and he's playing that role, and he's trying to be a big shot. So him trying to paint the town with Sheila, this woman that he just met, that he is basically bribing to spend time with him, like, it fits, because he wants to be this big shot gambler guy. And so he also tells the casino owner to challenge the biggest gambler in town for tomorrow. And that biggest gambler is Phil Nolan. He's a big shot gambler. He's a gangster, as we find out later. And he ends up calling Ace the next morning to set up their game. And that's when it's revealed that Ace has accumulated $200,000. So Jimbo is growing more and more concerned. He references that Phil Nolan is a gangster, and he's just worried for Ace. He's like, isn't he like kind of mean? And that's not someone that you really want to mess with. And at this moment, Ace is getting more. In contrast to the earlier scene, like at this moment, Ace won't listen to Jimbo's concerns. He is just kind of drowning it out. And I thought that was interesting as it's kind of a subtle way to further develop Ace's kind of descent into this greedy, self-centered, faux big shot that he's made himself out to be. And when Nolan and the gangsters come in and Ace orders room service, that like it's a fun kind of comic relief there, because he has to spell his name for the room service people. And I thought that was a really nice touch for this running theme of him wanting to be this big shot, but not being one at all. Like it's almost like he's trying to fit into this archetype that he wants to make for himself, but the realization that he's coming to, or that he will come to, is that he just doesn't have what it takes. He doesn't fit into that. So the gangster Phil Nolan comes in, and they decide to play dice, and Phil wants to play with his dice specifically. And at that moment, I really thought that Phil was going to have like trick dice, and it was going to he was going to get on to what Ace and Jimbo are doing. But ultimately I wasn't disappointed that didn't happen, because I feel like if that were the case, it would have led to a less satisfactory ending and a more darker ending. And I feel like this episode up until this point has done a great job of, creating a premise that pays off with a satisfactory ending that's more positive than negative. So they're gambling, and it always makes me okay, like this type of story, like someone who has this power to influence things to their liking. It kind of harkens back to A Most Unusual Camera also, but like, it always makes me laugh that in these types of stories, when the gamblers or the people that are manipulating things are doing that to get money, like they don't even try to attempt to cover themselves. Like they don't even try to make it seem like okay, I think of like The Incredibles, the end of The Incredibles, when Dash is on the track team, and like they have to like Mr. Incredible is in the stands, Mr. and Mrs. Incredible, and they're like, okay, you need to make sure that you don't go full superpowered or anything. Like, you have to, pace yourself and everything and make it look like, they have a chance of winning. But like, like I like that, like that's something that I like in those types of stories. But like I just, for the most part, it's never that. Like it's always like, okay, every single roll of the dice they're gonna win. Every single game of roulette is going to be a win. Like they don't, like maybe it's just me being just anxious, like an anxious person. But I'd be like, if I was in that scenario, I'd be like, okay, I would play it a little. I'd bluff a little bit in a weird sense, because like I'd put up like maybe $10,000 and then purposely lose just to kind of keep things going in a sense that just to keep the ruse going. Another example of that is in 11/22/63. That he goes back in time and he gambles and stuff, and it's always like he doesn't do anything to like make it seem like he's not cheating. It's just something that I wouldn't even call it a nitpick. It's just something that makes me laugh every time. Yeah. So anyway, so they're gambling, and Ace is just having the time of his life, and then Sheila comes in, and he introduces Sheila as his sweetheart, his good luck charm, and all that. And Jimbo sees Ace, and like that's kind of the turning point for him, is when he sees Sheila, because he's deducing that Ace is either cheating on Kitty or has immediately moved on from Kitty and dumped her outright and moved on. And so that's the moment where Jimbo decides that he's just not gonna do it anymore. And I love this, because again, it is so in character for this character up until this point, because he truly cares for Ace and Kitty. And it's not that he's not jealous, he's not upset, he's not angry, he's not vindictive, he's not doing this out of revenge or anything. He is choosing not to manipulate the game, specifically so he can save his friend from himself. And just as luck would have it, Ace is going all in on this round, and he tries to roll an 11, and the way that Ace says 11 is just pretty funny to me. Like he's like 11, 11, 11.
It's a lot of fun, huh, honey? Right? Win a million, lose a million, just like that, right? Okay, 11 is the number.
Ace.
You got it? 11, and this is it.
Ace.
Now, don't bother me.
Ace, listen,
All right, 11. And there it is.
I got a kick out of that. Like, I like that read of the line. It's in keeping with the tone of the episode. So, Jimbo doesn't manipulate things after, he makes an effort, like saying like, hey, Ace, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you something. And Ace won't listen to him. So, he rolls a 3, loses everything, and then everyone leaves. Sheila leaves because, Ace is not rich anymore, and the gangsters leave. And there's a fun scene where Nolan is just telling him like, hey, if you want to do this again, I'd be more than happy to. You got hard, kid, but if you want to do this again, I'd be more than happy, because he just made like $200,000 off of him. And then at this moment, Jimbo he's like, I'm sorry, I guess I just blew a fuse. I don't know what happened. I tried to tell you and everything. And then at this is another turning point in the episode. Like Ace could be angry. He could be just really like he as an echo of the earlier scene where he discovers Jimbo's powers. Like he could have that reaction again. He could have that angry reaction, almost that threatening violence reaction where he kicks the door and kind of like almost punches him. And he could have that, but Ace starts laughing and sort of in hysterics. And they start laughing together. And I thought that was an interesting reaction. And I think that my read of that is that it's Ace coming to terms with his gambling problem. And maybe he's laughing because he's instantly realizing how detached the success has made him. And he's realizing just how much of a big shot he is not, and how his personality, like it's giving him clarity to realize that, okay, well, Kitty is everything. Kitty is worth all the money in the world, and I now realize that because I've lost all the money in the world. It's an interesting read of that. Like they could have gone more drama and made it more, had another scene where Jimbo acts as Ace's conscience and spell out like the themes of the episode, but they went with this route, and I really appreciate the writing in this episode for that reason. So we go back to the cafe, and Ace is having the one-armed bandit removed from the cafe, or the diner, I guess would be, I don't know if there's a difference, but, and he's trying to reconcile with Kitty, and he ends up proposing. She, takes a coin, she gets a coin from Jimbo, and she flips it, and, he calls heads, and she's like, okay, yes, I'll marry you. And it's super heartwarming. Like, it's beautiful. And the episode ends with the three of them in the diner, and Jimbo kind of revealing, just to us, really, that he still has the power, and that him losing it in the hotel room in an effort to save Ace from himself was specifically so that he could rescue his friend. And I really like the sentiment of that. I think that that's a really, really sweet ending. And I'll go ahead and play Serling's closing narration here.
Some people possess talent, others are possessed by it. When that happens, the talent becomes a curse. Jimbo Cobb knew, right from the beginning. But before Ace Larson learned that simple truth, he had to take a short trip through the Twilight Zone.
So to kind of round out this review of the Prime Mover, I think that maybe, first of all, again, just to reiterate, I think that's a really sweet ending and a very uplifting and positive ending. And I think that maybe in watching the new Twilight Zone on CBS All Access and seeing how those episodes, for the most part, have ended in downer or shocking endings, I think that having that so fresh in my mind has made me appreciate the Prime Mover even more, because I just I feel like maybe subconsciously I was wanting this type of ending. Like I was wanting something positive and uplifting and everything. Because if you listen to my reviews of the new Twilight Zone, like even the one episode that has arguably a more positive ending, also has just some kind of darker overtones to it, and messages. And it's an episode that I love to replay. So, and then also in addition to that, coming off of Static, which was an episode that had a great ending but more heartbreaking in its message, and also being an episode that I honestly wasn't too crazy about, I was just floored that this episode didn't mix any bitter with the sweet. And it's a really beautiful story that ended perfectly. And that ending scene with Ace, Jimbo, and Kitty in the diner is just great. Like, it bookends the episode so beautifully, since it began with the three of them in the diner, and they're all relatively unassuming, everyday people, which is what the Twilight Zone in these first two seasons has excelled at creating. And I think there's just loads of charm in the way that their lives continue. They continue living their lives pretty normally after going through this whole experience, and it ended up enriching their lives in very personal ways instead of surface level greed and monetary ways. And I just really appreciated that as storytelling. I think that makes the Prime Mover, in my opinion, one of the stronger episodes of the Twilight Zone, of the episodes of the Twilight Zone that I've watched so far. So I don't know. I really loved this episode, and I was so happy. I was so happy with the way that this episode turned out and everything. So yeah, so that's my review of the Prime Mover, and I'll go ahead and go into some trivia for the episode. The slot machine used by the same character, as I said before, is the same one used in The Fever, which, as I said in Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic, it said that it's not the exact same one used in that episode, but it is the same one-armed bandit, the same design and everything. And also, I noticed that this episode shares some similarities, or the 2002 Twilight Zone episode Rewind shares similarities to this episode in some unique ways. Like in that episode, Eddie K. Thomas has a tape recorder that he can rewind up to 5 minutes of time, and he's a compulsive gambler, and he uses that to his advantage. And I think that that's why I thought that this episode ending was going to involve the gangsters kind of tricking Ace, or getting wise to Ace, because I thought that maybe Nolan's dice was trick dice, because a similar type of thing happens at the end of Rewind. And I think that episode of The Twilight Zone from 2002 is available on YouTube, so check that out if you want to. It's okay. And it also is, obviously owes a lot to A Most Unusual Camera as well. As I said during the review, the crash scene from the auto accident scene is from footage used in Thunder Road from 1958. There was a climactic last scene where Robert Mitchum's character's car crashes while trying to elude the law. Also, there's an episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender that kind of uses this type of story, like a character in it uses telekinetics to manipulate dice and other gambling instruments, or I'm sorry, uses like earthbending or whatever. I didn't watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I have an idea of what it is. So anyway, and the way that it's designed is the character uses the same kind of gesture of her head tipping sideways that Jimbo uses in this episode. And then also, and I couldn't find if this was confirmed or not, like if it was confirmed, but somewhat spoilers for Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, but at the end of that movie, there is a shot of a stable boy on the casino planet who telekinetically or uses the Force to pick up a broom. And it's very, like, it's kind of, in homage to the final scene of this episode with Jimbo picking up the broom with his power. I just thought that was cool. Like, cause I love that scene in The Last Jedi, and it's just cool to see, like, even though I'm not a big Star Wars fan, it's cool to see that, like, Rian Johnson used, or consciously or unconsciously paid homage to the Twilight Zone. I love that. And it just, it's, I was kind of charmed by that. And, also to kind of pay off what I, haphazardly talked about the meaning behind the term, the prime mover, but, the title, according to trivia, the title refers to the propulsion unit for a transportation system, such as a locomotive on a train, the tractor unit of a semi-tractor trailer, the motor on a locomotive or a railroad engine, or et cetera, et cetera. Also, in philosophy, the prime mover is a concept of a self-caused being that is the cause of all things. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And that's my review of the prime mover. It is 1 a.m. I need to stop doing these recordings right at night. But to round out this episode, I'm going to go ahead and briefly review Science Fiction Theater Season 1, Episode 3, No Food for Thought. And you should be hearing the theme music now, so I'm not going to spoil this episode, and it is available on YouTube. I'll have a link in the show notes of this episode. So No Food for Thought originally aired April 23rd, 1955, and kind of curiously, the episode, like, list on IMDb lists it as, like, episode, like, 5 or 6, but going off of, basically the DVD, I'm going to go ahead and say that it's the 3rd episode. An interesting Twilight Zone connection is that Vera Miles appears in this episode as Dr. Jan Corey. She obviously was in Mirror Image in Season 1 of The Twilight Zone. So this episode of Science Fiction Theater deals with kind of scientists who have developed a means to get human beings to have the nutrients needed without having to eat food. And And as always with science fiction theater, it's introduced by Truman Bradley, and he is introducing it as like using demonstrations in kind of visual aids to talk about the concepts of the episode. So in his demonstration in this episode, he kind of showcases an entire day's worth of food, and he starts talking about how science could potentially produce chemicals and pills to replace food. And the example that he uses is that I don't actually know how he connected that, but the plant life and how a plant can have just a small seed and it can grow in a very short amount of time with chemicals and stuff. So anyway, what I wanted to point out about this demonstration was that he, at his desk, he says, like, on my desk is the average amount of food that the average person consumes in a 24-hour period. And I paused it because because it's 1955, I wanted to see what all was on there. And so I made a rough list of everything that's on the desk, and there's some things that I missed, and I'm not too sure about what it is, but like on the desk there are 2 eggs, 3 full-grown carrots, a grapefruit, an orange, a quart of milk, a tub of what looks to be cream cheese, about 4 slices of white bread, an apple, a full head of lettuce, an onion, I believe, and 1 or 2 full ears of corn. Also a jar of what looks like pear slices or maybe pickled mushrooms, if that's a thing. I don't even know. And then there were like 3 or 4 different like containers of meat. And I mean, I thought that was kind of funny. There was just a lot there. So the episode itself has like kind of a mystery element to it. Like it starts out with an undertaker kind of being delivered a dead body, and the body is the death certificate that was given with the body states that he's in his 50s, but the muscle tone is of someone in his 20s. So this episode is all about kind of figuring out like what are these scientists doing behind closed doors, and there is kind of a time a propulsion thing, I guess, or a kind of countdown. Like the tension of the episode is that the doctor of the episode, kind of the lead of the episode is a doctor. He goes and meets with the scientists, and they figure out that like, okay, they have X amount of time to find out how to fix this nutrient thing that they've all taken, so that they don't die. And it's an interesting hook and everything. And I really kind of was into it. Like, for the most part, like these episodes of science fiction theater, and probably the reason why I'm on the fence about actually committing to a full series, review series of it, bonus review series of it, but is that it's kind of dull. Like even though it has that ticking clock, that propulsion, like just the episode itself is just kind of bland. It's not like exciting, and I know that it's completely unfair to review these while also reviewing the Twilight Zone, which is obviously, as stated several times, one of the greatest television shows of all time. To see this, like the predecessor show, one of the predecessors to that, being just this kind of goofy science fiction series. I don't know, but anyway, so there's some fun stuff in this episode, but it's overall it's it's okay. But it did make me wonder. Like there's a moment in the episode where it's revealed that the nutrient that they've created would give it's essentially like a pill, I think, where it will give you every nutritional need that your body requires. But the kind of side effect of that is that in taking that nutrient, you can never eat regular food again. Like your body literally will change its chemistry, in that if you were to eat any like physical food, like your body would not be able to process it and you would die. So it's like hard and fast, like you cannot eat any food ever again if you take this pill. And I kind of wondered, like, would I do that? Like, like it's a hypothetical. That's interesting. Because I don't know. It's just interesting. Like, if I had like a lifetime supply of these pills and everything, I think maybe I would, but I would also miss food. So I don't know. It's a conundrum, but, yeah, I don't know. Well, anyway, let me know what you think. Would you take a pill instead of food? I'm just thinking in terms of practicalities and stuff. Like, I can't, like, if I just don't have to worry about actual food and everything, it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about cooking. I don't have to worry about feeling terrible when I order a pizza instead of making something healthy or eating something healthy or anything. Or I don't have to feel like guilty about like eating a bag of Cheez-Its before recording an episode of a podcast at midnight, or 1 a.m., when I have to work in the morning. But anyway, I don't know. It would be interesting just to not have that stress in my life ever again, because I would just have a pill that would give me everything I need. And also it'd probably be healthier because, like I said, junk food and stuff exists and is so tempting. But anyway, let me know what you guys think of this episode of Anthology. Let me know what you thought of The Prime Mover and what you think of science fiction theater if you watch this. Also, the two kind of moral kind of hypotheticals that I posited, like, let me know what you would do. Would you be able to resist going for more money if you made $200,000 in a night or $1.6 million in a night by today's standards? Would you be able to cash out and just be like, no, or do you think you would be consumed by the greed to want to have as much as you possibly could? Also, if you could take a pill instead of eating food, would you do it if it means you can never have food? Let me know what you think. OV Anthology Pod on Twitter, Matt at obsessiveviewer.com, facebook.com/ Anthology Pod. Yeah, next time on the podcast, almost immediately after this, I will post my review, my bonus review of, wow, what is that episode called? The new Twilight Zone series. 6 Degrees of Freedom, which I'm really excited to talk about. I've been trying to compile my notes as I can. I have a lot of notes for it, so I'm really excited about that. Check that out on the feed after this episode is released. And then next time on the main feed, I will talk about Long Distance Call, episode 22 of Twilight Zone's second season, and my bonus review of a science fiction theater episode. I don't remember what episode is next, but hopefully it's a good one. Yeah, so that'll do it for this episode of Anthology. Thank you guys so much for listening, and if you like what I do here, check out my other shows, Obsessive Viewer and Tower Junkies, and if you're feeling generous, obviously you can donate to the podcast. That would be super great and much appreciated. Also, Patreon exists. So patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Minimum rate of $1 per month. Get access to special RSS feed that gives you bonus materials for the podcast. I haven't posted any like bonus anthology recordings. I don't remember if I mentioned this in a previous episode, but I haven't done that because I don't know. It's a solo podcast, and like the bonus, the exclusive content on Patreon is just me and my co-hosts on the other podcast just BSing back and forth. So anyway, it's a lot of fun. It's very entertaining. We have about over 8 hours worth of bonus content on the Patreon feed. So, yeah, I would say if you pay $1, pay us $1, you're kind of really getting your money's worth there. So, check that out. Patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. I am going to go to bed and go to work tomorrow and hate my choices of recording podcasts late at night. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. And now, here's a clip from a recent episode of The Obsessive Viewer, a weekly movie and TV podcast from obsessiveviewer.com.
No, you said, I know she hasn't been on the show in a while, right. But that's no reason to knock on her door in the middle of the night asking for her movie opinions or something like that.
Which, again, guys, that's no...
Guys, come on, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Right?
And,
I mean, everyone wants to hang out with me.
Harass me. I just,
No one wants to harass you, Matt.
I just...
Sorry.
Look,
I'm harassable, okay?
Hey, I am the hero of the AMC Southern Plaza 5:45 screening on May 11th of Endgame. So I think that
There are going to be statues in your honor.
Yes.
I heard a rumor that the mayor is going to give you a key to the city and that they're going to make May 11th Matt Day.
I hope so. What's funny is that May 11th is actually National Twilight Zone Day. That's it.
Fun fact.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, let's finish this up because I need to go home and actually record anthology episodes. So, hope you guys enjoyed this special bonus episode, this car special. We got a car special going.
Anthology is edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. For a full archive of our episodes, go to anthologypod.com/archive. You can also like the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod and follow the show on Twitter at OVAnthologyPod. If you enjoy the show, please take a couple minutes to leave us a rating and a quick review on Apple Podcasts. This is the easiest way to support what we do, and all it costs is a little bit of your time. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can make a PayPal donation at anthologypod.com/donate or support us on Patreon for recurring donations and access to commentary tracks and B-roll audio recorded exclusively for patrons at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Every donation goes toward paying the fees to keep the podcast running and is greatly appreciated. Official Anthology merch, including shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more, can be found in the Obsessive Viewers TeePublic store. You can find a link to the store in the show notes of this episode and at anthologypod.com/donate. Or you can simply search for Obsessive Viewer at tpublic.com. For information about the Obsessive Viewers annual live event showcasing short horror films from local filmmakers, check out shocktoberinirvington.com. And for an archive of all our events, as well as news about potential future events, head over to obsessiveviewer.com/live. For more podcast content, you can find our flagship movie and TV review and discussion show, The Obsessive Viewer Podcast, at obsessiveviewer.com, and on Twitter at obsessiveviewer. You can also find Tower Junkies, a podcast where Matt and co-host Tiny share their love of all things Stephen King and his magnum opus, The Dark Tower series, over at TowerJunkiesPod.com and at TowerJunkiesPod on Twitter. And finally, check out The Secular Perspective, Tiny's side project podcast, which tackles current events and life's big questions from the perspective of secular hosts Chad and Amanda at thesecularperspective.com. Bumper music for this podcast comes courtesy of As Good As It Gets, which can be found at facebook.com/asgoodasitgetsband. You can also find As Good As It Gets music on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Kitties.